Hi, everyone, and welcome to the seventh episode of Opportunities in Biodiversity. This is Devanshi, and along with me, I have Destiny and Lisa. And today we are going to talk about working overseas. Let me introduce myself. I'm Devanshi. I work as a fundraising coordinator with Saiben and Destiny.
So, I am Destiny Penny. I'm actually a recent graduate of the University of Waterloo master's program within sustainable development. And I currently work as a teacher and with World Vision as a policy and programs department team member.
And we have Lisa with us.
Hi, my name is Lisa. You might recognize me from my other talks. I am the policy coordinator of Saigon. And I've been organizing this series to talk.
Okay, so we would dive into our experiences. So, Lisa, do you want to talk about your experiences working overseas?
Yeah, definitely. I held several positions around working overseas, but my most notable one that I found very interesting is actually working in Thailand at a grassroots organization called Corsi. So where I actually learned how to conduct scientific diving. So every day we switch from doing either coral reef survey, fish survey, predator survey, and whatever projects that come up. So actually, almost every day we are doing a separate project and repeat on a several days basis. And every day we kind of get partnered with different people, so you learn to dive differently. Then in the morning we go diving. In the afternoon we actually enter all the data, and basically that gets compiled into a report that used by the Thai government to make decisions. So that was my first introduction to diving, and I found it very rewarding. So another experience I had was actually working in Florida at Mo Marine Laboratory, where I work as a manatee research intern. So basically what we did was we checked the life history of manatees through photo surveys. So we actually either go out to do boat surveys or land survey and even aerial survey. So I actually got to go out in a four-seater plane as a secondary observer, helping to camp manatees and their movement patterns. And on top of that, because Mo has a big research program with around 40 different departments, they allow us to try and work for other departments. So I get to help out with the dolphin research, with the spotted eagle whale research, and I get to do some husbandry work with cephalopods, so like cuttlefish and squids and octopus, and that was very cool. So yeah, those are my different experience. I know Devanshi has some similar experience of working with dugongs. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So I had two different international jobs, I would like to say. So continuing on to Lisa's manatee experience, I worked with Marine Mammal Research Project in Southeast Asia. So the animal that I was working on was dugong, and my job was to go diving in the deep seas and search for their evidence. So we would just go and look for actual animal observations, or we would go looking for their feeding trails or underwater presence. And we would compile all the data and map it into usable or suitable habitats versus unsuitable habitats. So if at all there would be some potential scopes of development in the ocean, like they could probably do it in the unsuitable habitats that we have. Another experience that I had was working in the prairies of Colorado. So that was a research project to map vegetation in the prairies and also the animals that we saw, just to figure out the habitat used by the animals and the impact that a drought could have on them. That was a 2-month research project. And for both my opportunities, I have a similar story of how I got them. I owe it to networking. So I networked with different professors from different universities and asked them if I could get a summer job or a summer field experience with them. And that's how I landed up both the positions. Yeah, so now Destiny can talk about her experiences working overseas as well.
Okay, so I just wanted to say quickly, thank you to the Canadian Youth Biodiversity Network and the organizers for putting this platform together so that we can kind of come together and discuss topics regarding sustainable development and the environment. I'm actually one of the newest members to the Canadian Youth Biodiversity Network as a sustainability outreach coordinator, but nevertheless, just as passionate. I kind of have a different kind of stream that I'm taking to this. I know that my colleagues here, they have a more biodiversity background in terms of marine biodiversity. I kind of have been taking this in terms of sustainable development and international development. So my journey initially started off actually, when I was a child, I've always had a passion for the natural environment and for development, kind of trying to understand how the world works and how injustices can be solved. And so my initial start within international development actually began in high school, oddly enough. And so you mentioned, Devanshi, about opportunities and the idea of networking. And so this would be a prime opportunity for me in my life, was with my school. They had this program, this facilitated trip program that took students to Nicaragua and places within Latin America. So that would be anywhere from Honduras, El Salvador, as I mentioned, Nicaragua. And it was in conjunction with a youth organization called Las Cañadas. And essentially what it was is we would go as Canadian youth, and we would try to have a cultural experience and dive into what lives are like in different country and contexts. This kind of sparked my passion even further. And so that led me into applying for my bachelor's degree, which was actually in international development. And there, in terms of opportunities, is where I had to kind of dive into an internship. Now, for our audience that is watching, internships are a huge thing, which we can kind of facilitate and apply our academic understandings to the real world, to real world context. So for me, I've had a little bit of both. I've had the informal placement experience, but I've also had the formal internship experience. My internship within my undergrad, it was based in conjunction with Global Affairs Canada. It was a piloted project called EquiHubs, and it was between two organizations, Canadian World Youth and Youth Challenge International. And essentially what it did is it obtained students who were either in the field of environment or international development, and we would go to a site. I went to Lima, Peru, and we would work with youth, particularly rural youth, on sustainable development initiatives. So anywhere from basics in terms of recycling practices all the way up to topics regarding global warming, for example. This is where I really got to apply my knowledge in terms of how to do surveys. As Lisa mentioned, she did a lot of surveying as well. So surveying the youth population, trying to understand the factors, the barriers, and the opportunities that students, specifically rural youth in Peru, wished to leverage. So this experience, of course, a more formal internship based off of Global Affairs Canada, really allowed me to apply my knowledge. Now, coming into my most recent experience as a recent graduate of my master's degree within the University of Waterloo for sustainable development and sustainability, I actually took the informal route. So I have been working with a very grassroots organization right now. It's actually a cooperative in rural Mexico. It's called Las Cañadas in Bosque de Niebla. And what they do is they're a sustainable, completely sustainable, self-sufficient cooperative located in rural Mexico, specifically Veracruz. And they deal with rural youth within the area and teach them how to be sustainable within their daily lives, whether that be through teaching them how to farm, teaching them the basic principles of sustainability, what the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are and how they can apply that into their daily lives. So it's very different in terms of, for example, the audience that is watching today, understanding kind of what route you wish to take within your desired career field, and seeing what opportunities in terms of your organizations, if you want a more formal placement internship, so that would be through possibly a government agency, for example. Course application processes for internships are very different, and they range differently across different countries as well. So I know within Canada here, we have a lot of formal applications in terms of if you're a student, if you're a full-time student. A lot is based off if it's a paid internship versus unpaid. From my personal passion, I should say, is just leveraging all opportunities that have come across in my life. So I have taken, you mentioned again, Devanshi, about networking, any opportunity to speak with a professor. And professors are super, super knowledgeable and super great contacts to leverage because they've already been in the field. They have that expertise, they have those connections, and as a student entering into whatever field you choose, they have some direction for you to possibly follow, some contacts, some expertise, and some professionals. So yeah, I would say networking has been a huge part of my life, and just grabbing every opportunity that I have been able to grab, and it's led me to continue my passion. And as I said last week, I completely graduated my master's degree. So it's just following your passion is really what you need to do, and kind of researching and planning ahead to where you'd like to go. And everything seems to fall into place from my experience when you follow your passion. So
That's so interesting, Destiny. Congratulations on your master's.
Yeah, congratulations,
oh,
Destiny.
thank you.
So
it's been a very long time coming, but it's good.
Yeah. So talking about the formal versus informal internships, can you talk a little bit about the differences and which one was probably most interesting for you?
For me personally?
Yeah.
I've always been I like to be within the field. Specifically within international development, I find that there's either two sides. You can do kind of the back work in terms of either strategic planning, program development, project management, where a lot of the times you are kind of on the back scenes and you're assessing the specific situation or the specific context in which you're working. I've always had a passion for actually diving into the field, diving quite literally for you and Lisa, but more so being in the field, having hands-on experience, and learning the context in which you are trying to dive into. It's very different for someone who has, a Canadian background, who grew up in Canada, to apply their knowledge in a different context. You have to be completely well versed in it. I think that is one way to be effective in your discourse, is to understand the context, understand the people, understand the culture, and also understand the challenges and barriers, whether that be through governance, lack of infrastructure issues. So kind of understanding the context in which you work with. So in terms of internships, I've always been more driven to more informal, just because I find that within my academic background, it's really allowed me to take what I've learned and take what I know, but yet apply it to different contexts. Formally, you have a lot of experience, and there's a lot of amazing potential within more formal government internships and kind of positions. I've just always been more driven to like the in-field, hands-on experience where you can really apply what you know and see the change actually happen.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, as opposed to an internship experience that is way more sort of formal, grassroots is always
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, so just
But I
going
would
off
point
that
out that it.
Go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would just want to point out my two experiences that I discussed. Like for Mo is basically a research facility that established over 30 years ago. So actually by the Shark Lady, some of you might know, and it has since then grew into this facility with different research station and taking in a lot of interns every year. So going into something that established is nice that you get to experience different departments to work in, but at the same time, because the departments have a way of doing something already, so to speak, so it's a little more difficult to kind of initiate your own project. So before you kind of start your own project, you need to know what they are doing, what they've been doing, the data. Maybe they already done your research in the past. It's just that they found that it didn't work. Whereas my experience of Core C, since it is more like a new organization and it's actually, established in Asia by non-Asian people. So it offers a more different perspective on how things work. Like there's language barrier, and there's cultural barriers to how things work. But at the same time, because it's a grassroots movement, it gives a lot of room to do your own project. If you suggest something and they are capable of letting you do it, they will let you go ahead and try something new.
100%. Destiny, you were saying something.
Yeah, no, to just build off of Lisa's point, I think that's a great point to really take into account is when you enter into an organization or even a government agency that has been established for many years, as a member or as a new member, participating member, it's important to know that there are structures in place and certain protocols and processes that have already been established years prior. So when entering into that sort of space, just be mindful that there are things that have been established, and it's kind of hard. I wouldn't say hard, but it is a challenge to try to kind of initiate new ideas. I find personally that within a lot of grassroots organizations or very localized organizations that I've worked with, due to the small nature and capacity, there's tons of opportunities for growth. And I think for someone who is very interested in kind of building with an organization and really kind of fostering change, I think that is a great path to take, because capacity is lower, but there's so much more potential. Not to say that in terms of a government agency that the capacity is not there. It's just more so that the capacity has already been established. So when trying to integrate any new changes, there might be a little bit more difficulty. And then, of course, when you're dealing with different cultural contexts or more international experiences, oftentimes I've experienced that when you're dealing with an organization in a different country, for example, that has lower capacity, they are very eager to improve on their structures and their systems that are in place. So just to keep that in mind, that there is not so much a challenge, but a slight barrier in terms of how you would then apply or enter into the system in which you're working within the space. So Lisa, I think that's a very good point that you mentioned, that there's more. It's not so much that there's less opportunity to grow, but there's more opportunity to build with a more localized, small capacity organization.
Yeah,
I definitely agree to that. There's a lot of freedom in working with the small grassroots organizations. So that brings up to the challenges. I would like to start with the challenge that I faced. Of course, like when you work overseas, there's always this big language barrier when you want to try talking to the locals.
Oh,
And exactly. So, what are some of the challenges that you faced? Destiny, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. Oh my goodness. I can tell you within the field of international development, there is no shortages of challenges, but I think that sparks the passion for need for development workers or individuals that are very interested in engaging with the environment. There are challenges, and that being said, it's what kind of should fuel your fire. Me, I've had endless amount of challenges in terms of whether it be through the application processes, because within Canada's context, within internships there are a lot of application processes, and that being said, you might not be accepted in some terms, and sometimes you may. um, there's been challenges in terms of if you're dealing with an organization, specifically more so grassroots, how do you even connect? Sometimes the formal ideas that we have of communication, so for example, basic email or even internet access, sometimes in certain contexts, internet's not even available. So how
Right.
do you kind of work with that situation? And you did mention language barriers, and I tell you, I am an advocate for learning how to speak Spanish. I won't learn it fluently, but I've had my troubles where I was immersed in, and I lived in Peru for 3 months. And in the city, sure, you get a lot of English, but when you start moving into those rural areas, there's not a lot of English. So understanding for a development worker specifically, how do you work with those barriers? And then of course, for my main challenge would be anyone seeking to kind of improve and kind of experience these international opportunities. You are most likely going to experience some sort of culture shock,
Yeah.
whether that be from an individual who's coming from a country to Canada, or from any Canadian student who is willing to travel abroad. There's always some kind of culture shock that we obtain, and it's all about being human. We're immersing ourselves in a different context in which we're not familiar with,
Yeah.
right? So for that, my kind of strategy is always to just kind of remain focused in what I wish to do, and that's it in terms of improving and growing my skill set. But also, I think it's important to be a sponge, and with that I say take in as much as you can. There is going to be good times, there's going to be bad times, and there's definitely going to be challenging times, but that's how we grow as people, and that's how we grow as professionals, right? So I have been in scary situations where I've been stranded in Mumbai for 7 hours and lost my passport. And there's been times where I'm at the top of Machu Picchu, and I'm so thankful that I figured out how to make it somehow. So with every challenge and within every downfall, there is for sure an opportunity on the other side. And so for anyone that might want to enter into a field of either development or environment, but are unsure or kind of scared to take that leap, do it, because there are going to be challenges, but that is what makes us grow as humans, and that's what makes us grow as professionals. So that's my input on that.
Lisa, did you have your fair share of challenges?
Yep. So
Internet.
if any of
Speaking of
you that
internet issues, that has experienced.
yeah, so going off of what Destiny is saying, I'm actually sitting outside of a library right now, and it's raining around me. So I have a challenge right here. But yeah, for those of you that tuned into our talk last week on International Youth Internship Program, actually for that program, they address a lot of the challenges that we will face overseas. That was actually a lesson that I was like, wow, I wish I received this years ago before I started working abroad.
Right.
So the idea relationship that that program was actually my fourth or my fifth international experience at that point. So a lot of the stuff I already learned, and some of the challenges that Destiny mentions, like culture shock, actually coming home, there is also a reverse culture shock, because things are just so different from what you are used to working abroad, that coming home is actually not normal anymore, or like you have all this cool experience abroad, and then coming home, people cannot very kind of relate to what you experience.
Absolutely.
And on top of that, culture is also a very big thing And I mean culture as in how people talk or do things. So the North America culture, if we want something done, we will oftentimes talk about it directly. Whereas in a lot of our Asian culture or like South American culture, they might go around talk about a lot of irrelevant things before they get to the point, and that might get very, very frustrated. So yeah, that is something that basically you kind of learn to adapt and adjust to as the time goes. And also scheduling is another thing. In North America, again, we like to schedule things well in advance and let people know. Asian country, they might go like show up at your door, go like, hey, we have a meeting in 15 minutes, or come downstairs right away.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's all about being flexible and adaptive and having an open-minded, and you will face challenges, but at the same time, you will have a lot of fun.
Exactly. Yeah, I would like to add on a few challenges, and those are like getting your work permits on time, getting your field permits on time, because for every research work or every data collection that you do on the field, you need a proper permission from the local government of that country. So getting that on time, it can take a really long time, and there's not a lot that you can do about it except for just following up and repeatedly knocking their doors and asking for your permission. That can be a little stressful, but well, if you get it on time and if things work out well, the whole experience can be very, very rewarding. Yeah, so that's what we have for the challenges. And we are open to any questions if anybody has. Feel free to chat, to type it in the chat.
So just to add, so I know our original opportunity in biodiversity series is only supposed to last until end of August. So today was supposed to be our last episode, but since you guys have been so wonderful, we decided to add an extra episode on education. So actually next week, tune in at the same time on Wednesday at 6:30 for a talk on education. So there would be talks on whether grad school is necessary to get a job in this field, and a little bit about studying overseas. So that is very exciting.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yep.
And yeah, our key takeaways from this conversation is networking is super important. And if you hear about an opportunity, don't worry to seize it, And if you want to work overseas, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yep, for sure. And change is normal.
Yeah. Yes. So
my mom, she says a good quote. She says, "The only thing constant is change."
Change.
So
exactly.
I've kind of taken that when working abroad, and you mentioned it, Lisa. Be adaptive. You have to be kind of a sponge when you take on these experiences, because that opens up so many opportunities, whether that is in terms of your emotional vulnerabilities when dealing with different contexts that may or may not be comfortable, or even just opening up your mindset. And you mentioned also being uncomfortable within a different language. There are times where you might not know what they're talking about, but it's all about kind of the gestures and kind of how to communicate and figuring out what works for each other. And every experience that I've had, to an end, we have made it work some way or another. So there are going to be challenges, and it is almost like a trial and error period where you have to see what works, and you have to be innovative in your thinking when you are trying to be creative, and how you are going to try to either communicate, or how you are going to kind of implement a certain policy, for example, or a certain strategy within a project or an organization. You have to be creative when you think of new ideas, and how to kind of implement those in a different context, for example.
Yeah, and if things work out well, you'll make some wonderful friends abroad.
Yeah, for sure. Lifelong friends.
Yeah. Lifelong friends, yeah.
And that if you want to travel in the
That's
future, you have
point.
friends everywhere.
Yeah, you always have a home to go to in a different country.
Yep.
So if we don't have any further
I also
questions,
find it's cool because I still have friends in India, for example, or in Peru that even though I may not be, directly working within the field there, or may not be I might be in a completely different space in terms of working with a different organization. It's always good to have those connections because in the event that, who knows, I might need some information regarding Peru or might need to dive into a little bit of context or governance with India, for example, you can access those friends and then you start building your own network, which as a young professional, especially, that's a huge thing because then you're building your own capacity and you're building your own network, which is huge.
Yep, it's super important to start building your network at a very young age.
I do have a question for you, Devanshi and Lisa, if you don't mind, because I know you guys are both avid and professional divers. How is that? You mentioned the idea of permits. Would you, as an individual, access those and approach the government yourself as a worker, or how would you go about that permit process?
So for me, I had to actually approach the local forest department. I just reached out to them through their office to get the permission because I was diving in protected area. So not everybody's allowed to dive, and you have to establish a clear purpose of what you're going to do.
Of course.
So I just applied to it directly, yeah.
Now, in the event of challenges, as we mentioned, what would happen? I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but in the event that you don't get a permit, for example, how do you then shift your work around that, so to speak, inconvenience?
So luckily, I did manage to get my permit, but if not, my plan B was to interview people and see if they saw marine mammals, and I would collect data through indirect sightings or indirect evidences, because I could still go and talk to all the fishermen and see if they have spotted some animals around in locations, and if they have some recordings or like photographs or video of those. I would have compiled that and still try to get some information.
Lisa, are you still there? Or did her internet?
I think Lisa's having some internet issues, but so if you don't have any more questions, we could actually end the live stream now. So thank you, guys.
If anyone else has any questions, where can they access information, Devanshi?
So yeah, if you have any questions after the live session, feel free to reach out on Facebook or Instagram or email us. Our website is cybin.ca. And that's all we have for today, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Yes, thank you guys for watching.